are. Good morning. We are at Mem Zayin Amud Beis at the Mishnah, and we're, Mr. Hashem, going to finish the third parak today. It's an accomplishment. We are like a third of the way through-ish, a little less. Okay. We're doing well. Okay. Our learning is Ilin Nishmas Mindel, Mariam Bas Kalman Ruvain, her Neshama Shem and Aliyah. Okay, so here we go. So we've been talking about candles. So the major themes that we're going to be discussing and still discussing even in the next parak are muksa. Muksa is a major theme, which is a very relevant theme. I hope we've been taking away some relevant halachos about muksa. But the main context that many of these halachos have been kind of springboarding from has been about moving lamps on Shabbos. And we have the machlokas Rav Shimon and Rav Yehuda. And here we have one more halacha about lamps. So nostin kli tachas haner lekabel nitzotos. If a person has a lamp and it's sparking. Okay, it's sparking. It's shooting off little sparks. So the halacha is you're allowed to place a vessel, an empty vessel, to catch the sparks. In other words, you have like a metal plate or metal bowl. You want to place it next to it so that the sparks, they hit metal, it'll just go out. If it's going to hit your wooden countertop, it might cause a fire. So therefore, you want to prevent the fire. You can place a lamp under the sparks, no problem at all. However, we did quote this. Very good, right? Excellent. You're not allowed to place water in that vessel because in doing so, you're extinguishing the sparks. Now, one caveat, we're not talking about a scenario, we're going to see a whole bunch of halachos in the Gemara about fires, where much of it is not going to be so relevant in our day and age. In other words, to extinguish a fire on Shabbos, simply put, is asr. It's forbidden. It's one of the 39 malachos. Let's say there's a fire that is, heaven forbid, burning, and the only feasible, the only possible outcome that could happen is it's going to burn down a house, but not harm anyone. You know for a fact it's not going to harm anyone. Are you allowed to put it out? Not really. If you know for a fact, okay? Now, nowadays, all the posts can basically say, we don't know that for a fact, okay? Your houses are too close to one another. You have wires going from house to house. Bottom line is you have the littlest fire in your house and you have the slightest concern it's going to cause a fire. You extinguish it whenever you can, period, okay? But we're going to find many halachos in their context where you have these houses which are standalone. They're not like in Eastern Europe, these houses. These houses are like these mud huts in Babylon, right? These are not houses which are going to cause, the assumption is not going to cause problems if there's a fire in one house. And that is a given assumption in many of these mishnayos about not extinguishing fires. We're assuming we're talking about a case where there's no danger to life. Okay, so I just want to make that a caveat as we see different halachos. So the halach over here is if you have a candle and you want to go ahead and ensure that, let's just say, the sparks are going to be caught, you are not allowed to place a bowl with water in it because in doing so, it's causing the sparks to extinguish. Right? A spark is still a little bit of a fire. Spark jumps into the bowl. The bowl, if it has no water, it's fine. If it has water, it's extinguishing it. That's a problem. Okay, that's the end of the Mishnah. And now the Gemara is going to analyze both teachings. One about placing a vessel where there's no water, which is permitted, placing a vessel with water, which is forbidden. We're going to analyze both. So it says the Gemara, so when you place a utensil under where the sparks are going, you are limiting its ability to be functional. We saw again this whole discussion we had a few weeks ago actually, or whatever it was, and that is that when the sparks land on the utensil, it would seem that, remember we had this opinion that said on Shabbos you're not allowed to go ahead and make a utensil unusable. By putting something muksa on it, you're making it unusable. So if you place a utensil where spark's going to fall, the spark is muksa, it's going to fall on the utensil. Now the utensil is unusable. You are going ahead and being mevatza kli mechana. According to one opinion, that's prohibited because you are now causing utensil which was previously usable to now be non-usable. So Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna, Breder Rav Yeshua, nitzotos ein behem mamish. Nitzotos are not of substance. In other words, if a spark falls right over here, right, it's going to go out. I won't even know it's here. Maybe I'll see a tiny little black thing. It's not there. It's nothing. In other words, and therefore, although typically, according that we had this opinion that said, I can't go ahead and place a muktzah item on a non-muktzah item on Shabbos, because in doing so, or cause that to happen, because in doing so, I am preventing that utensil from being used the rest of Shabbos, which is, according to one opinion, a prohibition. But when it's talking about sparks, as soon as the spark's there, it disappears, basically. And therefore, you are not mevatel kli mechano. You do not go ahead and cause utensil to not be usable on Shabbos, and therefore, there is no problem. Okay? Fine. End of discussion. Now we move on to the second part of the Mishnah. You're not allowed to place water in that vessel because in doing so, you're extinguishing the sparks. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to attempt to align this Mishnah with another Mishnah, which has a debate. The Mishnah is talking about a scenario where you have an actual fire, and the Mishnah talks about what you could do to prevent the fire from spreading. Again, with the caveat that we just said, there's no danger to life. Danger to life, do whatever you want. We're no danger to life, and so there's a machlokis in a Mishnah later on, which we're going to see. The Chachamim say, if you have a fire that's spreading, you could go ahead and place empty utensils around the fire, and those empty utensils will help prevent the fire from spreading. Okay, earthenware vessels, they're not so flammable, it's gonna prevent the fire from going. Rav Yossi, and the Chachamim say, you could even put water in those utensils, and so what's going to happen? It's going to start burning the earthenware things. They're going to pop, and they're going to drop water on it, right? It's like this, contraption. Basically, you're setting up these jugs of water, and the fire is going to spread. It might start burning those utensils, and if it does, great. The utensils will burn. They'll break open, and water will fall in the fire. The fire will extinguish. Fantastic. Rav Yossi says you can't do so. Even though you're not extinguishing directly, it is gram kiboy. It is causing extinguishing a fire. You're also not allowed to do that, according to Rav Yossi. Okay? So the Gemara says, Leimatznan stamak Rav Yossi. It would seem that this Mishnah is going like Rav Yossi. Right? The Amar Gorem Lekibai Asar, who says that indirectly causing a fire to be extinguished is forbidden on Shabbos. Right? Again, Rav Yossi was the one of the opinion who said that I cannot place jugs of water around a fire, because even though I'm not extinguishing directly, since I'm setting up those jugs and the fire is going to cause the jugs to break and then it's going to cause the water to fall, that's forbidden. Here too, I'm placing a bowl next to the sparks. I'm not directly extinguishing, but since I'm doing an indirect type of extinguishing, this would seem to be the opinion of Yossi and not like the Chachamim.
You're putting the kli there with the water in it as you place it. You're not
Either way is going to be prohibited. Either way is going to. Well, I'm not pouring it on fire. In other words, correct. I put a bowl. Let's go with that case. I put a bowl with water next to the fire.
Right, because that would automatically have it be extinguishing, but it's more similar to the case we were just quoting, where
it's
indirect.
Right. So it says questions the Gemara. The Gemara questions this analysis. The Gemara says, "V'tispera, is that really what's going on over here?" Eimer dam Rav Yossi b'Shabbos. Rav Yossi said you're not allowed to place these jugs on Shabbos. But Erev Shabbos mi Amar. He didn't say anything about Erev Shabbos. Again, our Mishnah. Let's go back for a second to our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is talking about not only placing this utensil on before Shabbos, but even not only on Shabbos, but even before Shabbos. Okay, Erev Shabbos mi Amar. Did Rav Yossi say you're not allowed to do so on Erev Shabbos? And if you want to say that our Mishnah is only talking about on Shabbos, saying you can't do it on Shabbos, then it would be aligned with Rav Yossi. Now, Tanya, we have a brisa that gives a little bit more detail. Again, we saw just this principle is just very important. That Mishnah is the tersest of all, and that's what the main source of the oral law. Brisas are oftentimes going to have similar language, but are somewhat more verbose, and they'll shed a little bit of light on the Mishnah. So we're about to have a brisa which says a few more details and helps us understand our Mishnah. What does the brisa say? Vatanya, nostin kli tachas ner lekabel minisotzos. You're allowed to place a vessel under a lamp to catch falling sparks. Bis Shabbos, you can do that on Shabbos. Vein sorbach lover erev Shabbos, and you certainly are allowed to do so on Friday. Velo yitain lesocha mayim neshim mechabed. You can't place water in the vessel because doing so extinguishes the sparks. May erev Shabbos. You can't do so before Shabbos. Vein sorbach lover b'Shabbos, and you can't do so on Shabbos as well. Okay, so what you see over here is that this prohibition in our Mishnah applies explicitly. We see even before Shabbos. When did Rav Yossi? So again, let's pull all the pieces together. Our Mishnah, now we're saying explicitly, our Mishnah that prohibits placing a bowl of water next to sparks is true before Shabbos begins. You can't do it before Shabbos, meaning I light my candles before Shabbos, and I'm a very cautious person. Okay, I'm going to a friend's house for whatever, and I'm afraid those sparks can come out. So I want to go ahead and I place like a whole. You can imagine someone like selling like a silver bowl with you can put water. It's a brilliant idea, right? You could sell this thing which has around your Shabbos candles. You have a silver bowl with water. Says the Mishnah, forbidden. Not only on Shabbos do that, but even Erev Shabbos. Now initially we tried saying that this Mishnah goes like Rav Yossi, who says that you cannot cause extinguishing of water. And because Rav Yossi was the one who said you can't place bottles around the thing. But we're pointing out that it's not true because Rav Yossi only prohibited it on Shabbos itself to do that. This Mishnah, now we see explicitly from this brisa, which is shedding light, no pun intended, on the Mishnah, saying it's true even on Erev Shabbos, right? Again, our Mishnah is telling us I can't make a cool candelabra which has a water bucket, a water stream around the candles. I cannot do that even on Erev Shabbos. So what's the rationale for that? Rav Yossi is telling us another Mishnah on Shabbos. If there's a fire, I can't place buckets around the water. Okay, but this Mishnah is even being more stringent by saying I can't, and he's saying that on Shabbos. This Mishnah is even more stringent, saying that I can't even do this on Erev Shabbos. You with me? Yeah? Yeah. So basically, what's coming out over here is who's this opinion? This opinion is even more strict. Rav Yossi is the more strict one by a fire, saying can't place buckets of water around a fire. This is even more stringent, saying you can't place water right around it. Why? Who is this opinion? It can't. It's not like the rabbi. It's not like Rav Yossi. This Mishnah goes even like the Rabbanan, who are more lenient than Rav Yossi. Why shani hacha mipnei shemikarev es kibuyo? Because here it is like direct extinguishing. What does that mean? Because in the case that Rav Yossi and the Rabbanan are arguing, there you have a fire over here, and they're going ahead and they're placing these buckets filled with water. And what's going to happen is with some time, they're going to burn the buckets are going to melt or explode, and the water is going to fall in. There, the Rabbanan say, no problem. Rav Yossi says it's an issue because I'm causing, even though I'm indirectly causing extinguishing, it's still my problem. Over here, I'm placing just exposed water right near sparks. If I were to do so on Shabbos, there's a very good chance that as I'm placing it there, or as I'm pouring the water in, or as I'm moving the water closer, it's going to immediately extinguish the sparks. There, even the Rabbanan would agree that that's going to be a problem. And just like they're going to say it's a problem to do so on Shabbos, they therefore prohibit, they take away my brilliant, new design that I want to sell, and they say that since on Shabbos I wouldn't be allowed to fill this little stream of water around my candles, since it might directly cause a spark to go out and be extinguished, I also can't do so Erev Shabbos for the same reason, because I might end up doing it on Shabbos itself. So basically what we have over here is like this. When I'm pouring water around a fire that could be shooting sparks, I can't do so on Shabbos because it's direct extinguishing, because sparks might be flying out. I can't do it on Erev Shabbos because I might end up doing it on Shabbos itself. That is, everyone agrees. Then we have another machlokas, which we're going to see later on. If you have a fire burning over here, the Rabbanan say you're allowed to put bottles of water around it because it's indirect. There, the fire is not going to be immediately extinguished when I place those bottles. Rav Yossi says, no, still I can't do it because it's indirect. But this halacha, the stream of water around it, nothing doing. You can't create design this little candelabra because it could be more direct, and therefore everyone says it's forbidden. Make sense? Okay. Hanrulach Kira. We have finished the third parak. We're up to the fourth chapter. Pat yourselves on the back. This is tough stuff. The Shabbos is not an easy masechta. This is a big deal. Okay, and you're waking up at 6:20 or whatever time you're waking up to get here. Okay, very, very good. Okay, so now we're going to get into some mishnayos, which some of these halachos are not a new parak. The parak is primarily talking about hatmana. Hatmana is insulating, but it's also going to review. It's going to touch upon many more laws of muktzah as well. Okay, so we're going to learn about the laws of hatmana, insulation, and the laws of muktzah. We already saw some of the laws of insulation before, so let's just review quickly. There are two time periods that insulation is forbidden. On Shabbos itself, you are not allowed to insulate something, even if the thing you insulate with does not increase the heat whatsoever. Okay, so let's say a towel, which presumably doesn't increase the heat, it's just like a regular substance. You wouldn't be allowed to take your chicken soup off the fire and wrap it all up with the towel. Okay, Erev Shabbos, we did see it, just to review, that according to most opinions, not the Chaznish, but according to most opinions, if you do when Hatmana is forbidden, if you do Hatmana that's not complete, it's permitted. In other words, if I cover it but leave a substantial side open, it's permitted. So sometimes people want to cover something with like a towel, but they'll leave, let's say they put a towel on top, but you have the two sides open, that's already not a problem. So Hatmana means covering it in a meaningful fashion. That's the Hatmana that we're prohibiting. So again, on Shabbos itself, you can't take your pot off the fire and wrap it with a towel. Okay? Before Shabbos, you would be allowed to do that. Okay? You would be allowed to take your soup off the fire and cover it with a towel. What you're not allowed to do is do Hatmana with something that increases heat before Shabbos. Okay, something which increases heat, you're not allowed to do hatmana with on Shabbos, before Shabbos. Now, we're going to see a whole bunch of substances which we don't use. Like, they're going to talk about, like, pulp of sesame pulp. You and I are not putting our pot in sesame pulp. I don't know what sesame pulp looks like, okay? But we're not using those things. The one practical ramification, application of this probably is when, and which will come up in our Gemara, is when I do hatmana, we're going to see that that not only when I wrap it with something that causes heat, but let's say I put it on top of something that increases heat, and then I do hatmana. What's an example of this? I go ahead and I have my chicken soup on the fire, on my plata, okay, on my hot plate, and it's not, and I want to make sure that it's really piping hot. So what do? While it's on the hot plate before Shabbos, I go ahead and I wrap it with a towel. Right? So now it's going to really preserve the heat. It's like it's in an oven now. It has the heat coming from the bottom, and it has the thing covering on top. That is forbidden even before Shabbos, because that is a form of hatmana that is increasing heat. Okay? What you are allowed to do is if you place a towel in a way that exposes like one or two of the sides completely, that's okay. So if I place a towel and it's going to have a side exposed, then that's not really called insulation. But to go ahead and wrap it well while it's on the fire, that is hatmana in a way that is mosif hevel. Okay, so again, hatmana on Shabbos, you are allowed to. You are on Shabbos. You could go. On Shabbos, you can't do atzmana with something even if it doesn't increase heat, right? A regular towel. Before Shabbos, you can't do atzmana with something only when it's increasing heat, right? If I took my soup off the fire before Shabbos, let's say I didn't want to keep elements on Shabbos. So I took my chicken soup, there's no fire, plugged everything out, I took everything out, right? And I took my pot off the fire right before Shabbos, and now there's no fire. I turn the fire off. Then I go and I wrap it up, that's fine. Because the towel itself is not mosif hevel. Now the rationale behind these two things, which we'll see soon through the Gemara, is as follows. On Shabbos, the reason I can't do any atzmana is because if I'm doing atzmana, I'm indicating that I really want to make sure it's really hot. The Chachamim were concerned if I'm that concerned that something's very hot, and what sometimes I come on Shabbos and I want to make sure something's very hot and it's not hot. So I'm concerned that the person who is going to do atzmana, since I know in my head I could do atzmana, I could do insulation, and I come and I see my pot is not hot, right? Then I might go ahead and turn on the fire, right? This past Erev Shabbos, busy Erev Shabbos, whatever. I don't know. Our fuse blew, actually. It wasn't anyone's fault. Our fuse blew right before on Shabbos. We light the candles and like, oh, everything seems cold. Okay, but it's between Minash Mashos. We'll see. Later on, we'll see the lechos of Mir La'akum, Mir La'askan on Jew in certain circumstances. Fine. But the point is, we come about and we're like, oh, the chicken soup, I want to go and wrap it up because let's say I realize the fuse blew and the chicken soup is warm, but you still have like an hour till we're going to start the meal. And so I want to make sure to preserve the heat. So I'm going to go and do hatzmana, but if I see it's too cold, I might go ahead and start warming it up. So the Chum were afraid, no hatzmana on Shabbos at all, because once I start thinking about hatzmana, insulation, I might go ahead and increase the heat. That's why I can't do any hatzmana on Shabbos. Hatzmana that is mosif hevel, hatzmana that increases heat, that goes back to the same concerns that we saw about leaving uncooked food on the fire. Just like you can't leave uncooked food on the fire unless it's a covered fire, etc., right? Because there's a concern I might adjust the heat. So too, if I'm doing hatzmana with something that it has the potential of increasing the heat, like something which has like coals, fires, something that has the ability to increase the heat, if I do hatzmana with such a thing, then there's a concern that I might stoke those coals when Shabbos begins, and that's why before Shabbos, I can't do hatzmana with something that is mosif hevel, something that increases heat. Okay, so those are the two rules. Those are the principles behind them. Now let's jump into the Mishnah. Okay, so it says the Mishnah, beginning of the fourth parak. And these principles we'll revisit over and over. I just want to give a brief introduction. What is a person allowed to insulate with, and what is a person not allowed to insulate with? Okay. Okay. Ein tomnin lo begefes, velo bezevel, velo bemelech, velo besid, velo bechol. A person's not allowed to insulate with mark. Mark means like pulp, nor with manure, nor with salt, nor with lime, nor with sand. Bein lachem, bein yevation, whether they are wet or dry. Okay, a person can't insulate with those things. Velo beteven, velo bezagin, velo bemochin, velo basavim, bizman shein lachin. Okay, and straw, grape skins, flocking, that's like the shearings of a sheep, like wool, okay, or with grasses. It's only forbidden when they're moist. Aval tomnim behem kshen yevation, you're allowed to insulate with them when they are dry. When they're dry, they don't really do any insulation. Okay? So basically these are different substances. Again, it's going to be hard to really like wrap our heads around this. Okay, but the point is that, oh gosh, I'm sorry guys. Okay, the point is that the reason that, again, because it's not so relevant, we don't like think of insulation like this, but basically we're going through different substances. Okay, fine. And basically some substances, yes, some substances, no, depends on the heat that they're able to generate and how qualified they are at insulation. Okay, ask the Gemara. Ibailahu, gefesh shel zeisim tznan, aval d'shum shebin shaper dami. So the Gemara said the first product that you're not allowed to insulate with was gefes. Gefes again is like pulp. Okay, or like something from different. Okay, and the Gemara is going to question what type of pulp or what type of mark. Is it referring to olive mark? Okay. Which is very intense. Olive pulp is something which is gets very, very strong, okay? And therefore, the implication would be, but if it's sesame pulp, it'd be fine. Why? Because sesame pulp is not as intense, doesn't generate as much heat as olive pulp. Or when the Mishnah said pulp, it's referring to both sesame and olive. Okay, so again, it's not as relevant for us, but the point is that olive pulp it generates a lot of heat, and therefore the Mishnah said you can't use pulp. What's it talking about? Olive pulp. And it's only olive pulp, but sesame pulp would be fine. Or when it said pulp, it meant sesame pulp, and the same would be true for olive pulp. The Gemara is going to try to answer this. Tashma Amar Rabbi Zera, Mishum Chad Dvei Rav Yanai. Rav Zera said the name of one of the students in Rav Yanai's base medrash. Kupa shetaman ba'asr lanicha gefesh shel zeisim, a box in which one insulated hot food. So basically, you have, you take a box, nothing, basically just a little box, and you have food in it, and you're not allowed to place it. Asr lanicha gefesh shel zeisim. You're not allowed to place it on top of olive pulp. Okay, so this statement seems to be explicitly Shema Mina Shel Zeisim Tnan. It seems to be that from the statement that said only olive, here it says explicitly olive mark, olive pulp. That means that it's only olives that you can't do so. The Gemara says no, maybe there's no proof. It could be that insulating in sesame is also forbidden. Le'inyan asuke havla dezeisim maske havla deshumshimin lo maske havla. But in terms of radiating heat upwards, there may be only olive pulp and not sesame pulp. What's going on over here? Insulation typically means surrounding something, right? And so the Mishnah said you can't insulate in pulp. Did it mean olive pulp, which is very intense? Did it also mean sesame pulp, which is not so intense? Then the Mishnah tried answering the question by saying, we have this case where we said you can't take a wrapped piece of schnitzel, let's say, and place it on top of olive pulp. Where it says, clearly, the fact that they said explicitly olive pulp over there, that means that our Mishnah also is referring to olive pulp. The Gemara says, no, there's no proof. Maybe when it comes to insulation, which means wrapping it all around, it'd be forbidden with sesame pulp as well. But when you talk about placing something wrapped, like we have on our hot plates, you wrap it with something that doesn't increase heat, but you're placing on something which does increase heat, maybe there only olive pulp, because we said olive pulp is much stronger. So there it's going to be usher for olive pulp, because olive pulp is going to not only insulate, but also generate heat upwards. And there sesame, no, because sesame is less intense. But when it comes to insulating by placing it surrounding by sesame as opposed to olive pulp, there sesame will also be included because of the fact that it insulates just fine. Okay, we'll pick up on this Gemara, and again we're going to be jumping back and forth between insulation and laws of muktzah. We will see some very relevant halachos. Have a wonderful day.